Lord be with you. Several years ago, an MIT student went to the Harvard University football stadium every day during summer. He blew a whistle and scattered birdseed on the field. For 15 minutes each day, he walked up and down the field, blowing a whistle and scattering birdseed. At the first Harvard football game that season, the referee blew the whistle for the kickoff, and the game was delayed for a half hour to get rid of the thousands of birds that swooped down onto the football field looking for birdseed. The MIT student did it for two reasons. First, he hated Harvard. And second, he was conducting research on conditioned response. If you had seen him scattering seed in the summer, then you might have been confused by his actions. Why is that student feeding birds? Won't that whistle scare them off? He was preparing for the future. We prepare for the future in many ways. Pensions, certificates of deposit, savings accounts, IRAs, retirement homes. This is a big one for itinerant pastors. I have known a couple of pastors who were in their last appointment when they realized they had nowhere to go when they retired. A couple of years isn't a long time to save for a retirement home. They had some big decisions to make. If only they had prepared for the future. I try to live my life preparing for the future spiritually. How can we do that? How can we live our lives preparing for the future spiritually? We have excellent examples on this very subject provided for us in the Holy Scriptures. Abraham, for example, is called the father of faith, but only at the end of his life. Abraham's early years were filled with lessons that teach what not to do. He lied. He showed incredible disregard and disrespect to his wife out of fear for his own life. Yes, he loaded up his family and possessions and went to a land where everything was different, and did it only because God commanded him to get up and go. But that journey proved the failure of Abraham's faith. He failed to trust God. Abraham and Sarah actually laughed in God's face when God told them they were going to have a baby. They mocked God. They didn't trust God. Only in his golden years did Abraham have the faith to sacrifice his well-loved son if that is what God required of him. His life had been spiritual preparation for the future. Abraham's son Isaac carried on the tradition of lying to protect himself, presenting Rebekah not as his wife, but as his sister. Eventually, Isaac obeyed God and remained in the land as God commanded, despite famine and enemy attacks. His life taught him how to accept God's will in his life and prepared him spiritually for the future. Now we get to Isaac and Rebekah's sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob elevated lying, cheating, conniving, and swindling to an art form. He cheated his brother out of his birthright. He tricked his father Isaac into giving him the family blessing, which rightfully belonged to Esau. And then Jacob encountered a con man who spun his web and caught Jacob in it. Only years later did Jacob learn to stand his ground and to accept the nearness of God in his life. His life had prepared him spiritually for the future. I so much admire young people whose faith is so much greater than their years. I know how hard God has had to work on me to get me to this place of trust and obedience in my life. I have such respect for young people who exercise their faith regularly. They are preparing for their futures spiritually. Aren't you thankful that we are not judged today for what we did when we were 17 years old? I'm pretty sure I just heard my mother moan from heaven. Let's just say those were not my most holy of years and leave it at that. Like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I was learning lessons of what not to do, but also learning how faithful God was, is, and always will be. Sometimes we talk like faith is something people either have or don't have. Thank God, who with infinite patience and mercy gives us a faith that can grow and strengthen with God's help, a living faith. My faith is not even close now to what it was when I was 17. God prepared me for the future spiritually. And I and everyone who knew me then am extremely grateful. Thanks be to God. Amen.